Everyone told me to play Darksiders. For years, actually, not just in the time I've been doing YouTube, but I have old friends that recommended it. So why didn't I ever check out these games before? Well, I guess I fell into the narrow-minded attitude of dismissing games that were labeled as clones. I was a huge God of War fan growing up, so when Darksiders and Dante's Inferno came out and were said to be like God of War, for some reason that turned me away. Why would I want something that plays like God of War when I already have God of War? I don't know where this attitude came from, because it certainly didn't apply to shooters. I played Duke Nukem 3D and Quake despite being a Doom fan, and just because Silent Hill plays similarly to Resident Evil doesn't mean I ignored it. So what gives? Maybe it was that one Spyro game that had God of War's combo system that made me say enough is enough. Honestly, I don't know, I can't explain it, but since I had that attitude, I guess it was good that I didn't play them back then, because who knows, maybe I would have gone in with a closed mind and not enjoyed it. And after seeing God of War get turned into a franchise about rowing boats and crying, I'd give anything for 10 classic God of War clones right now. So yeah, I'm open to it. I'm ready for some classic 2010 hack and slash action. Darksiders has you taking control of War, one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, apparently tricked into getting involved in a war between heaven and hell. An unsanctioned war, and the council that oversees existence blames him for what has transpired. To prove his innocence, he vows to bring the one responsible to justice. War then sets out on an adventure across destroyed parts of the earth and some other crazy places that I'm not quite sure what they are, fighting demons and angels, looking for the truth. You meet the Dark One Samael, who sends you around killing the Chosen, the big boss creatures in each section. And you gotta bring their hearts to Samael, which will restore his power, and I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't entirely hooked on the narrative here. The world is fun, there's lots of violence, and from time to time there's some really inspiring art design, but I didn't get too invested in what's going on. The protagonist War is entirely one-dimensional, unfortunately, but he's still kind of fun to listen to because he's so over the top.
I serve only the council, only the balance, as the horsemen always have.
The revelations near the end of the story were interesting enough, and I probably would have connected a little more to the story if it were delivered more frequently, but I felt like there was some really long breaks between story moments, and the moments we do get don't really enlighten us that much about what's going on. But hey, at least the story is not dumped into dozens of lore pages. I miss the days where you just got story through cutscenes and dialogue, instead of having to pause every 10 minutes to read 5 pages of notes. So I picked the highest difficulty, as I normally do with an action title, because I want to feel that survival pressure. And sure enough, Darksiders delivers some challenging fights early on. Enemies hit very hard. Some of them will drain your entire life bar in a single hit, deleting one of your extra lives before you even know what happened. You have access to a decent amount of starting moves, soon able to unlock more, and the threat of such high enemy damage makes it feel very satisfying to air launch them and focus them down with combos to quickly delete them from the board. I'm still not sure if the combo counter actually does anything though. It doesn't say it's giving you any extra XP like God of War or Devil May Cry, so I didn't really care about keeping up my offense to preserve it, and that was a big letdown. I have heard there are some attacks later in the game that become combo counter dependent. I don't know, I didn't see anything like that, but even if that is the case, large parts of the game appear to have no mechanics tied to the combo counter. If you are actually earning something by keeping up your combo counter, please let me know in the comments. If I am wrong about this, it's still an issue that the game didn't communicate what was happening. It really is sad because you can do some pretty cool combos, and Darksiders would definitely benefit from a DMC-style combo XP bonus system with a freshness mechanic to reward you for attack variety. There's a lot of combat options, more than a God of War title but less than DMC. You hold 2 weapons on 2 buttons, square for sword, triangle for secondary weapon, if you're using a PlayStation controller like me. It was fun to start with the sword and finish with the scythe to air bounce enemies and then follow up. Hold R1 for a home run swing of the sword to send enemies out of bounds, or make the scythe spin around and stun everyone. The scythe gets an upgrade to generate more souls, giving it more reason to be integrated as you fight. You can dash cancel out of pretty much everything, even long wind-up heavy hits. Just dash out if you think you're in danger. And to balance out that power, the dash has a long cooldown. Dante, this man, is not. I enjoyed using the dash button to simply guard cancel out of attack strings and start them over, creating long grounded combos. The weapons are fun, but sadly the magic is not. You get a really basic 360 damage attack and some buffs to do fire damage or take less damage yourself. There's not a lot of creativity going on with these abilities, which was a letdown considering how wacky and exaggerated this game's world is. When enemies get low on HP, they're ready to be executed, and I was happy to see these aren't meaningless. Some enemies will give you health when killed this way, but most will grant extra wrath, which is your magic meter. Very God of War, obviously, and that's cool. Though I really wish there were air executions. Half the time enemies are ready for execution, they're floating in the air and you just gotta wait for them to land. The controls feel responsive. You get iframes from executions, and you can cancel out of attacks directly into executions, so there's just a really smooth flow to combat. It's interesting that you've got weapons that have a very wide attack radius, like God of War, but you also have a lock-on system for focus damage and air combos like DMC. I like this hybrid system a lot. I do struggle with dashing while locked on sometimes, I end up not getting the right angle, but being able to lock on in a combat flow that's essentially God of War is nice, and helps deal with bosses that fly all around the level. At shops, you can spend souls, your XP, and sell artifacts to upgrade weapons, unlock new attacks, and buy consumables, which function in an interesting way I've never seen before. You can't just buy consumables, you have to possess these things called vessels. The more empty vessels you have, the more consumables you can keep on you. And then consumables are bound to shortcuts to be used in real time. It's an interesting attempt to balance consumable use so you don't break the entire experience by hoarding them. One by one, I was noticing these well-implemented and interesting systems, and Darksiders had me pretty happy for a while. Here and there, I was met with a serious challenge that had me restarting over and over until I got it right, and it felt great to finally come out victorious. I was especially happy with the early campaign structure, as you're thrown into multiple mandatory combat challenges where you have to familiarize yourself with your options. Kill enemies while they're in the air, kill enemies with executions, perform parry attacks. You have to learn to do these things and do them several times to pass. And I love that because action titles that have so many combo options can sometimes not stress the value of those options to the player. It can be easy to overlook them, not experiment, and just mash buttons. Sure, balance is one aspect of getting players to play smart and fun, but it's also great to just make them do certain things a few times so they can see how fun and useful they are. That way, if the balance does end up breaking, hopefully they'll still experiment and be creative even if it's not so necessary. There's a decent amount of challenging enemies that have weaknesses to certain things to push you to use more variety. I especially like the big toxic guys who can have their toxic effect disabled for a while with a shuriken toss. But you also have the angels appearing to be vulnerable to the energy fists and you can kinda just push them around. And some enemies can be hard to just dash away from because they have multiple tracking long attacks, so you want to use the parry instead. Darksiders has smart design incentivizing use of your tools. There's also a lot of gear integration in the levels. You're frequently asked to use your abilities like the shuriken, the horn, and the grappling hook to find your way. I'm a huge fan of that kind of design, always reminding players of their abilities by making them necessary to traverse the world. The last action title I played that was really good at this was Hi-Fi Rush. The maps in Darksiders kinda have a Metroidvania thing going on, but not really because while you are using your abilities to get access to some spaces you couldn't before, you're not really backtracking in this game unless you're secret hunting. I rarely went back to any part of the map that wasn't required as part of the campaign, and in those cases the access to new areas was fairly limited. But again, that's because I didn't go exploring for all the secrets. Maybe there's a bunch of stuff out there, I don't know. And looking at the map itself is kind of frustrating because you can't zoom in. There's a variety of ways to get around the levels. You have the Icarus wings from God of War for gliding, which is also used on boost points. There's a wall climbing that you move along pretty quickly on, running along walls holding onto rails, grapple points that pull you to them or let you swing and jump off. Later on, you get a portal thrower that creates some really cool puzzle opportunities, essentially teleporting around the map. There are a few swimming sections which are fairly brief. There's a lot going on to shake up the experience, and I appreciate that. My only platforming issue comes from not being able to grab onto some ledges that look like you should be able to. You can only grab onto specific ledges, so sometimes I would fly over to a ledge and just slide right off and end up on another floor because of it. The campaign itself is where the game starts to falter, because Darksiders feels way too long for the experience it offers, speaking of story and in combat encounters. It doesn't have enough to fill out all this space. Huge parts of the map are drawn out, sometimes by those mandatory combat challenges I just got done praising. Like I said, I love them, but they're given to you as a task where you have to run all around a map you've already been through, activating each challenge, and it takes forever, because you run so goddamn slow. Holy Christ, where is my run button? This is a complaint not unique to Darksiders. I'm not going to say I don't wish I could run in the old God of War games, but this is just egregious. Maps are so big, your character is so slow, it becomes agonizing. Especially if you get turned around and go the wrong way and now you gotta run all the way back. And it's not particularly fun to be in mundane locations like a cathedral or the sewers for hours. Oh, you can feel it now, right? We've entered the negative section. It's all downhill from here. So, there's a lot about this game's systems that I like. While God of War is still my number one by far, with DMC as number two, there are some things I think Darksider actually does better than both of them. And it's certainly not the fucking camera. Oh my god, why does this always happen? Though I will say, as someone who isn't a fan of player-controlled camera in action games, it's typically okay here because of the execution animations that allow you to readjust the camera without interfering with your actions, like how they do it in the Arkham games. But yeah, things like the store and the gear integration, I think Darksiders is a clear winner. I like the avoid system in Darksiders better than the one in God of War. I like having two weapons mapped to two different buttons, that's really cool. But there are three massive flaws keeping this game from landing a high spot on my list. The boss fights, the health system, and the late game pacing. I'll start with the boss fights because it's the simplest thing to explain, I think. We'll see how long this section goes. I'm not calling the boss designs bad. On the contrary, I think many of them are quite good. There's a decent number of them and a few high-tier non-boss enemies that demand to be taken very seriously. Boss fights are all unique and require a bit of trial and error to figure out what they're doing and how to counter it. They just don't have the HP to put up a fight once you figure them out. Sure, they're dangerous at first, deleting your health bar in seconds if you do the wrong thing, but once you figure out the right thing to do, they die super quick. I was shocked by how fast these guys fall once I'm able to counter them a couple times and do a few combos. It's horribly unsatisfying. This guy on the horse, dodge him, hit him, he falls off the horse. Then you dodge some attacks, counter, dodge his projectiles, punish, and he's dead. And it's like, oh, it's over already? The spider boss, a truly intimidating foe. Well, once you learn the timing to dodge her attacks, recognize her stances, and position yourself for some good damage, she goes into a second phase where you just fly up and activate a cutscene and she's dead. That's it? I thought we were brawling here. On top of the disappointingly short boss fights with good bosses, we have the unbearably long fights with terrible bosses. Oh, isn't it fun to stand here waiting for this big, dumb, slow robot to inch his way over here? Any day now, so he can wind up his electric flail and break the ground. Time your dodge imperfectly and lose 70% of your life and start all over. And, oh, I just realized I owe a huge apology to Armored Core 6's level 3 boss fight with the worm. In retrospect, that fight isn't so bad. It's certainly nothing compared to Darksiders' worm boss. What is it with worms in sand? Silent Hill did this too, and it was awful. So we're shooting worms, dodging the big worm as he flies out of the sand, running away and shooting the big worm. Oh my god, it just goes on forever. One of those boss fights where you gotta pause the game after and say to yourself, wow, that was fucking terrible. Next, let's talk about the health system. This is the most important of the flaws because it's prevalent throughout the entire game, not just the boss fights or certain levels. And here we're going to get into some direct God of War comparisons because the health and magic system is something I regularly praise about the old games, and it's something they totally screwed up in the 2018 reboot. Here we go, Mayo's talking about God of War again, isn't that predictable? In God of War, if you take a bunch of damage in a fight and you go into the next fight without finding health, that's how you gotta handle it. You go in with low health and you're fighting for your life under heavy pressure. It becomes more important to execute a Minotaur to get some health back. You might end up using more of that magic you were trying to save. Your enemy prioritization changes, and you thank the gods for finally giving you that health chest on your way out. If you die during that fight, you do not restart at a checkpoint with full health. You restart with the same health you entered the checkpoint with, just a very slight percentage more. The game wants you to value your health and play defensively so you can go into the next fight healthy. This keeps you from playing like a careless moron on high difficulties. Yeah, if you die 40 times, you'll eventually regenerate a lot of health by constantly respawning. I'm not saying there aren't exploits. It's an imperfect system like any, but it's an excellent attempt at pushing players into valuing their health as a resource. God of War 2018 changed it into a baby mode system where anytime you die, you restart with full health no matter what you entered the checkpoint with. So there's no reason to defend your health bar because there's no consequence for your sloppiness. Well, guess which system Darksiders has? Yup, you restart at checkpoints with full health essentially. You get 3 lives back and a full health bar. And I'm sorry, but this just sucks so much of the fun out of the game for me. I'm playing on the hardest difficulty, and instead of playing smart, I'm able to pass these fights with only half my brain in the game, because it doesn't matter if I exit this fight with only a sliver of health. All I gotta do is walk into the next room, die, and I get all my health back. At least Bayonetta had a fight-to-fight ranking system to punish you for deaths under that same system, as arbitrary as it was, but Darksiders goes full baby mode by making 95% of the game's combat encounters meaningless through this free health recharge system. Eventually I just started running past enemies, taking damage all along the way. Because who cares? I get the health back anyway. I'm not saying that just changing the health system would make the game better. No, obviously it would create some unique points of frustrations that would also have to be rethought. I'm just saying I wish the game had been crafted that way. It sucks because I really like the combat options. The combos are fun and the enemy AI is interesting sometimes. I want to continue enjoying this. I can't because I know that I'm being rewarded for playing like shit anyway. Speaking of shit, the last problem is the late game pacing. The last 2 maps of the game are... I don't want to say they're bad, I'm not going to be that dismissive because there are things I definitely like. The Iron Canopy is filled with a lot of interesting puzzles and interconnectivity in the map using your gear, but the whole damn level is filled with spiders, and that's essentially it. I honestly can't remember if I did fight anything else in all my time here. All I remember are spiders. They suck. There's nothing interesting about fighting room after room of spiders. Spiders that respawn when you come back. No one wants an entire level of this in the late game. Or in the early game. No one wants this at all. And the last level, the Black Throne, God, I don't even know where to start. I've never seen a game stretch itself out so much in the final act. When you arrive at Azrael, it feels like the game is about to wrap up, but oh no, we're just getting started. Get ready to spend hours in this giant tower where everything looks the same, trying to align light beams, creating portals, throwing explosives, and only occasionally fighting a handful of enemies in combat encounters that have now been completely broken by the health system. Now, look, I love puzzles. I'm on record saying puzzle integration is key to the classic hack and slash experience. I'm very happy that Darksiders has puzzles, even more puzzles than we typically see in a game like this. That's fine, good even. And the puzzles are really well designed a lot of the time. The use of portals to get around and finding ways to get all your abilities to work together. There are a lot of satisfying puzzle moments that require imagination and curiosity. I'm not complaining about that. The problem is the amount. The final chapter of Darksiders, in no exaggeration, turns into a puzzle game. Puzzle after puzzle after puzzle after puzzle after puzzle after puzzle after puzzle. And just when you think it's all over and you brought the light beam across the level to free Azrael, he tells you that's just the first of 3 beams. There's more of this tower I gotta explore, more puzzles. Oh, god damn it. People give me crap about not finishing games, but you're really testing my patience, Darksiders. Ever since realizing the health system is broken, I've wanted to stop, but I'm trying to stick this through to the end. Puzzles and platforming, puzzles and platforming, puzzles, ah! Oh, hey, a combat room. Okay, yeah, let's do this. Maybe we're starting the combat section of this chapter. A minute and a half of combat, featuring only one interesting enemy. Open the door, and it's another bridge of portals. Oh god, I can't, man, I can't. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm out. I'm fucking out. If you could have seen the expression on my face at this point, I've never been so fed up. I've been miserable for hours, and I just don't care anymore. Crap on me all you want for not finishing games. I got pretty far. I don't need to do this to myself anymore. The pacing of this game has just completely tanked. The longer I play Darksiders, the more I hate it, and I don't want to hate it because I had a lot of fun with it in the earlier chapters. It's just completely fallen apart by the end, and I don't care what happens beyond this point. I don't care if the very next door leads to the boss and it's the best boss fight in video game history. They shouldn't have put 40 puzzles leading up to him. Oh god, how did I forget the flying section? This terrible, terrible flying section that also goes on for fucking ever. I was looking through my footage to find clips from my audio, and I saw this and I had flashbacks. This part is so bad and boring and long. Just shoot the things in a level that offers nothing interesting in terms of gameplay. What is it with these old hack and slash titles and their terrible flying sections? DMC 1 and the big boss fight at the end. Bayonetta has the same thing. What is going on? Yeah, I'm done, guys. Thank you for recommending Darksiders. I truly did love a lot about it. I'm glad I played it. The first half of this video clearly lays out all the good stuff. But man, 2 of the 5 chapters being like this, it's just not okay. It's gonna be a tough decision as to whether or not I can put Darksiders in my best of the year list, given how bad some of it is near the end. I'm gonna have to weigh how I feel as the year goes on and see what stays with me more, the positive or the negative. That's it for me. See you in the next video.